Welcome to Story Weaver.
The neon lights flickered above the entrance to the Void's Edge saloon, casting an eerie glow on the dusty street below. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and whiskey, and the sound of rowdy patrons echoed off the wooden walls. At the bar sat two figures, both dressed in leather and armed to the teeth. One was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a rugged beard and piercing blue eyes named Jaxon Blackwood. The other was a petite woman with short, dark hair and a quick trigger finger, Avery Steele. As they sipped their drinks, a shadowy figure emerged from the back of the saloon. It was the Silas Kane, a notorious outlaw with a bounty on his head. Jaxon at the bar turned to Avery beside him. "That's him," he said, his voice low and tense. "The one we've been looking for." Avery nodded, her eyes fixed on the outlaw. "What's our plan?" "We take him in alive," Jaxon replied, his hand tightening around the hilt of his gun. "No unnecessary bloodshed." But the outlaw was not going to go down without a fight. As soon as he spotted the two bounty hunters, he drew his own weapon and aimed it at them. "Looks like we've got ourselves a little showdown," he sneered. Jaxon and Avery exchanged a quick glance, then raised their guns in unison. The room fell silent as the three of them stood there, locked in a deadly standoff. "Drop your weapon," Jaxon growled, "or we'll be forced to take you in by force." The outlaw just laughed, his eyes glinting with malice. "You don't have the guts to take me down," he taunted, "but I'll be happy to prove you wrong." With that, the first shots rang out, and the brawl began. Bullets flew through the air as the three combatants ducked and weaved, taking cover behind tables and chairs. As the smoke cleared, it became clear that Jaxon and Avery had the upper hand. The outlaw lay on the ground, wounded but alive, as the bounty hunters approached him. "You're under arrest," Jaxon said, his voice cold and unyielding. "And don't even think about trying anything funny." The outlaw scowled, but he knew he had no choice. He allowed himself to be handcuffed and led out of the saloon into the waiting hands of the law. As the three of them walked out of the saloon, the tension between the two bounty hunters began to dissipate. Jaxon and Avery, who had been so serious and stoic during the shootout, now began to crack jokes and rib each other. "Nice shot back there, partner," Avery said with a smirk. "I didn't know you had it in you." Jaxon grinned. "I'm full of surprises, but let's not forget who actually took down the outlaw." They continued to banter and joke as they made their way to the nearest jailhouse, but their jovial mood was short-lived. As they turned a corner, they were confronted by a group of bandits, led by the outlaw's brother. Jaxon and Avery readied their guns, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. "Well, well, well," the outlaw's brother sneered. "Looks like my little brother didn't put up much of a fight, but I'm not going down as easily as he did." Jaxon and Avery exchanged a worried look. This was not going to be an easy fight. The bandits attacked with a fury, and the bounty hunters found themselves scrambling to keep up. Jaxon took down several of them with his precise aim, while Avery used her agility to dodge their attacks and strike back with lethal force. But just when it seemed like they might be able to turn the tide, Jaxon's gun jammed. He cursed under his breath and fumbled with it, leaving himself open to attack. Avery saw her chance and leaped into action, taking down several more bandits with a flurry of kicks and punches. But as she turned to face the outlaw's brother, he aimed his gun at her and fired. Jaxon saw it all happen in slow motion. He knew he had to act fast. With a burst of adrenaline, he tackled the outlaw's brother to the ground, knocking the gun out of his hand. They grappled on the dusty street, rolling and trading blows. Meanwhile, Avery had regained her footing and was able to take down the rest of the bandits. She rushed over to help Jaxon, but by the time she got there, it was too late. Jaxon lay on the ground, bleeding from a gunshot wound. Avery knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face. "Don't you dare die on me," she whispered. "We've got unfinished business, you and me." Jaxon smiled weakly. "I wouldn't dream of leaving you hanging, but you owe me one for saving your ass back there." Avery rolled her eyes, but there was a hint of affection in her gaze. Yeah, just hold on a little longer, okay?" As they waited for help to arrive, the two bounty hunters shared a quiet moment of camaraderie. They knew that no matter what happened next, they had each other's backs. With the sound of approaching sirens in the distance, Avery felt a sense of relief. They were going to make it. But just then, she heard a chilling laugh behind her. She turned around to see the outlaw's brother, who had somehow managed to grab a gun and was now aiming it directly at her. She knew there was no time to waste. With lightning-fast reflexes, she grabbed Jaxon's gun from his holster and fired. The bullet hit the outlaw's brother in the chest, and he fell to the ground, dead. Avery breathed a sigh of relief, but her relief turned to horror as she saw Jaxon's condition. He was losing too much blood, and she knew that help wouldn't arrive in time. "I'm sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I should have been faster." Jaxon smiled weakly. "Don't blame yourself. We did what we had to do." With that, he took his final breath and closed his eyes. Avery was overcome with grief, but she knew she had to keep going. She stood up and surveyed the scene around her. The bandits were all dead or captured, and the outlaw was safely behind bars. But at what cost? As she walked away from the scene, she made a vow. She would never forget Jaxon, who had fought beside her, and she would never stop fighting for justice. Years passed, and Avery became a legend in the bounty hunter community. She took down dozens of outlaws and made a name for herself as the toughest and most determined hunter in the land. But even as she grew old and tired, she never forgot Jaxon, who had sacrificed his life for her. His memory lived on, and his spirit continued to guide her as she fought on, never giving up and never backing down. And when she finally passed away, she knew that she had lived a life worth living. She had made a difference in the world, and she had done it with the help of a partner who had become much more than just a colleague. He had become a friend, a mentor, and a true hero.